Welcome to Cork County Council's webinar on open water swimming. My name is Caroline Casey and I'm Water and Road Safety Development Officer with Cork County Council. We decided to put this programme in place for members of the public to provide a set of guidelines for you, whether you're new to the sport, whether you're an improver or whether you're an advanced swimmer in open water swimming. We're going to take a look at how you prepare, how you plan for your open water swim, what's involved when you're out there swimming, and how to make sure that you're safe when you come out of the water afterwards. We have a number of speakers lined up, and I hope you really enjoy the programme. Thank you. Our first speaker this evening is Liam Crehan. And Liam has vast experience in working with rescue teams, with surfing and open water swimming. He also works in wildside sports, so he'll speak to us this evening in relation to forecasting, and he'll also touch on the type of equipment that you should be wearing while you are out open water swimming. So I'd like to welcome Liam to give his presentation now, and thank you, Liam.
Hi everyone, thanks very much for tuning in tonight. I just want to give a big thank you as well to Grainne and to Caroline for organising this event. I think it's a fantastic idea. We've had a huge upsurge in people taking into open water swimming this year, so I think it's a great idea that we run a webinar like this. So tonight I'm going to be covering open water swimming equipment and surf forecasting. And just to give you a bit of a background onto who I am. So I spent a couple of years in Australia as a search and rescue boat driver and instructor. And that work involved me organising the water safety elements of things like Bondi to Bronte, where we'd have upwards of 2,000 competitors in the water, and things like ice mile swims in Tasmania. And after that, then that work took me to Sri Lanka, where I was instructing search and rescue teams out of military units. And I currently work with Wildside Sports in Bandon, and I manage a store. We're a small but very mighty store on the bypass in Bandon, and we stock everything from kayaks to hiking equipment, open water swimming, you name it. So tonight we're going to start into it, and we're going to talk a little bit about open water swimming equipment. So when you think about open water swimming equipment, you're going to think about things immediately like wetsuits. So we'll start with that. If you're someone who just wants to go for a dip and just get into the water briefly, or go for a small bit of a swimming, start getting into it, things like 5mm winter weight wetsuits are perfect. So they're great because they keep the core really nice and warm. And when we talk about 5 or 5-4-3, all we're talking about is the ratio of the neoprene in the actual wetsuit. So this being a 5-4, what we mean is that it's 5mm here and it's 4 down the arm. So it progressively gets thinner away from the core. The whole purpose of these is that they keep you really nice and warm and buoyant in the water. So for things like surfing, they're fantastic, or things like going just for a dip, that's a perfect suit for you. If, however, you wanted to take that out and go for, say, a 1 kilometer swim or a 2K swim, you could do it, but what you'd find is that you'd be quite restricted around the shoulders, and you'll end up, instead of being nicely positioned in the water like this, you'll be positioned like this and moving across slower, where the chest is more buoyant. So if you're surfing, that's fantastic because you can be sitting there in the water waiting for your wave and getting blasted by wind and cold, and you'll still stay nice and warm, and your arms are still a little bit more free. But for front crawl swimming, where you're just doing that forward shoulder rotation, it's a little bit too heavy and a bit too much. That's where we come into things like swim-specific wetsuits. So these guys tend to be a little bit lighter all around. They are also thinner underneath the arms, so you can have a little bit more reach from the suit and a little bit more freedom around the shoulder area. The other thing about them is that the ratio of neoprene is a little bit different. Often they tend to be thickest on the calves, so you're either swimming straight or even downhill in a position like that, so you're faster. They're for very different use cases. So with the open water swimsuits, you'd never want to take that kayaking or take it out surfing just because there's a high chance you're going to rip it against something. They're perfect for open water swimming, but you just use it for that. So they're very different use cases. That's your wetsuits. Then we get onto things like your swimming accessories. So when we start going to that, we're talking about things like open water swim goggles. So with open water swim goggles, they tend to be a little bit wider than your regular goggle. Some will be tinted like this one, so you don't get that glare from the sun. And they're often that little bit wider and with a bit of better suction as well. So that's your goggles. You've got things like your swim caps. So you can either go for silicone swim caps or even neoprene swim caps like these, which just keep your head a little bit warmer in the water. Your things like your earplugs as well, like that. That's becoming quite a big thing actually with surfers and swimmers requesting them, just from things like Surfer's Ear. That's becoming a bigger issue. Apart from that, then you're onto things like your neoprene gloves and your neoprene socks or boots if you want to. They're just to keep your extremities warm. Now, some people don't like to swim with them because they find it a little bit cumbersome. I'd be one of those people personally. But there does come a time of the year when it's that cold and biting that you might just want to have them on. That's your swimming side of the equipment. Then it's the other thing to think about is getting warm afterwards. So whether it's your dry robe you have at home or your towel robe or whatever it might be, just getting dry. You can have things like standing mats as well, just to keep you a little bit insulated from the cold floor when you're getting changed. The other things that would be included in that is just having a warm beanie and a pair of gloves in the car. So especially a beanie, just because you've got so much heat loss coming from your head. Getting the engine on in the car and getting the hot air blasting is a good thing as well. And just maybe keeping a hot flask of tea or coffee in the car is a good thing just to have after swims. Apart from that, guys, that's your open water swimming equipment. But the other thing to mention is your safety equipment. So that's where we start talking about things like tow floats. So tow floats is what you'll start to see. Well, they're really popular in places like Myrtleville, Sandy Cove. You'll see them bobbing around. And basically what they are is they're a bag that's just inflated and being bobbed along on the surface of the water after you. They don't weigh anything and they don't slow you down. It's just a big bright object and they're inflated with air and you can hang on to them if you start to get a cramp. They become a life-saving tool as well if you're swimming in a pod and someone starts to freak out or just gets cramped up. Instead of grabbing you, you can put this in front of you and just give it to someone who's panicking and they'll grab onto that while they can just relax and you can get them back to shore. They're a really handy piece of equipment. With all the open water swim equipment, you're looking at high vis and you're wanting to be seen. Whether that's your hat, your tow float, whatever it might be, you want to be visible to boats, you want to be visible to people on the shore and to other swimmers as well. That's the nutshell of open water swimming equipment. We could go on about it all day, but we're going to keep it pretty short. The next thing we're going to talk about is the surf forecasting element. So with surf forecasting, there's a few different tools that we can use, and they are just tools. It's not an exact science, so it's a case of getting used to using different forecasting apps and applying them to your own area. There's a lot comes down to general knowledge and just local knowledge of your own area too. So before we show you the slides of that, guys, we just want to let you know that Swim Ireland are developing an app that's aimed at open water swimming in Ireland, and you can hop away onto their website and you can click in it, and there's a little survey attached and you can have your say on what you'd like to go into that app. That brings us on to the slides of the Magic Seaweed forecast. So Magic Seaweed, a lot of you will have heard of it. It's the most commonly used app for surf forecasting. It's also really handy for beginners and showing people how to use surf forecasting because it's quite nicely color-coded. So as you can see on your screens, you've got a lot of information right ahead of you, and we can break that down and things start to become a little bit simpler once you know which column and what things mean. So with Magic Seaweed, you've got your timestamps on the left, and it's broken up into 3-hour intervals. Magic Seaweed will generally get updated every hour as well. In your blue column, going down, you've got your feet, and that's the average height of your waves. Magic Seaweed tend to do a 5-star rating as well. Now, this is aimed at surfers, but it can be applied to open water swimmers too. Their 5-star rating is basically the better direct swell and the better offshore wind. It's going to be better for surfers in general, but you can also apply that to checking out your local areas. Then that brings us on to the period. And that's in the center there. That's where you see like 9 seconds, 13 seconds, 8 seconds, whatever it might be. The bigger that number, the cleaner the wave is going to be. And generally the bigger it's going to be on the day. Then it goes on to that black arrow, and that's your primary swell direction. So that's showing that it's coming from the southwest, which for a lot of the coast down here is going to be quite direct. So it's going to have a little bit more power in it than if it was a westerly arrow there. Then it brings us on to a big important one. There is the wind. So the wind there on this day was showing that it was southwesterly as well, which means it's onshore and it's going to be quite blown out. And actually the day we took this, we went down to Chidani, and sure enough, it was very blown out. You've also got your wind speed there, and that's important too. So that's everything in a nutshell. It also shows your high and low tide and your first light and your last light as well, which is important if you're going out for a long swim. You want to be back before it gets dark. That is the information on Magic Seaweed. When you start looking at things like Wind Guru or Surf Forecast, they're telling you the exact same information usually, just in a different format. And some are a little bit more useful than others. So the way I think about it is I often think Magic Seaweed is a really handy first tool to use. And it's good because it's color coded, like I said. If the wind is onshore, it tends to be red. If it's cross shore wind, it'll be kind of an amber orange. And if it's offshore, it's going to be green. And if it is an offshore wind, especially on the south coast here, that means there's going to be north in it, and it's going to be colder when you get out from your swim. With Surf Forecast, the added thing I do like about it is that it shows you the energy of the swell in kilojoule rating. So we'll pop up the Surf Forecast slide now. We'll just have a look at that. So the surf forecast there, it's showing you the exact same thing with very similar formats, but it's adding on the kilojoules there, which is the power of the swell, basically the energy in the wave. And the bigger the number, the more power there is, and that's also going to affect your rip currents on the day. So, like I said before, it's about applying all this knowledge to the local knowledge of your area. Some beaches are going to be more dangerous when at low tide, when rocks are exposed. Some might be more dangerous at high tide when there's more rip current. So it's about applying the knowledge to your local area and getting used to it. But if you're going out for a surf, if you're going for an open water swim, it's really advisable to check a few different forecasts. And what I do is I just take the average of a few, especially if there's a bit of a drive time between you and that wave or you and that swim, because you want to make it worth your while. Webcams as well is a fantastic way just to get first-hand sight of what's going on. So you've got one at Inchydoney, you've got one at Garrettstown, and you can almost apply that down the line to the other beaches. So that's open water swimming surf forecasting. We could do a whole webinar just on that, but we're not going to. We're going to keep it nice and short and pass on to the next speaker. So I really want to appreciate you guys for your time listening tonight. And if you have any more questions, you can pop into the shop and we'll happily give you as much time as you need. So thank you very much. And I'm going to pass you on to the next speaker. Thank you. Bye.
Our second speaker at our webinar is Grainne Caulfield. Grainne is a pool lifeguard, a level 2 open water swimming coach, and she's an avid open water swimmer herself. Grainne is going to speak to us about planning for your swim, preparation before you enter the water, the benefits of open water swimming, the swim itself, and aftercare when you're finished your swim, which is very important. So I'd like to thank Grainne for participating this evening, and I'll hand you over now and Grainne will give you her presentation. Thank you.
Hi everybody and welcome to our very first webinar on safe open water swimming. It's great to see such fantastic interest. As Caroline has already mentioned, I am a level 2 open water swim coach, Ironman triathlete, and pool teacher and coach with Cork County Council at Dunmanway Swimming Pool. I coach open water swimming in the West Cork area after setting up West Cork swim coaching last summer. I literally could not keep up with the demand. 2020 has seen a huge explosion in popularity of open water swimming. It started during our first lockdown last spring and has lasted well into the winter season. You can see swimmers and dippers at every beach these days. Sunrise swims, sunset swims, quick dips, you name it. It's happening. And not all of them are wearing dry robes either, Liam. People are swimming longer into the winter season and absolutely loving it. Unfortunately, with this increase in sea swimming, there has also been an increase in call-outs for the Coast Guard and rescue services. This is not confined to new swimmers and dippers. Experienced swimmers can get in trouble just as quickly. During the summer months, our main beaches are patrolled by our Cork County Council beach lifeguards who give advice and keep our beaches and public safe. We do not have beach lifeguards after September. It's up to all of us to keep ourselves safe. Personal responsibility and prevention being the key here, guys. In a 2-week period, the Coast Guard in the Dublin-Wicklow region had 8 swimmer-related call-outs. The Galway fishermen, now famous, Patrick and Morgan Oliver, have recently carried out their 3rd rescue in the area. They just happened to be in the right place at the right time, 3 times. Open water swimming has huge benefits, both physically and mentally, but it is up to each and every one of us to take personal responsibility, along with education from recognised sources, and that is why we are here today. Now, anyone who is swimming in the ocean or dipping in the ocean regularly can agree with this next slide. I love swimming because when I'm in the water, nothing can catch up with me, not even my troubles. And that is surely true. Next slide, please. Okay, benefits of open water swimming. They are numerous, and when I say swimming, I'm also referring to dipping. But before I get into them, I think it's really important for anybody who is new to cold water swimming, and particularly anybody with any underlying conditions or heart conditions, to get the okay from your doctor. Open water swimming is known for stimulating the part of your nervous system that restores the body to a calm state. This results in a feeling of deep relaxation that lasts long after you get out of the water, helping you get a better night's sleep. It's a natural mood booster. It's one of the world's most natural mood boosters. Being immersed in water has proven to have had a positive impact on your mental health by helping you feel relaxed and enabling you to concentrate on slow, relaxed breathing. It's like a yoga class, but one where you get wet and very cold. Active swimmers will also feel a massive rush of endorphins associated with the activity. This applies to both swimmers and dippers because the first 3 to 5 minutes in the water is what gives you the most benefit. Seawater contains a whole host of healthy minerals including sodium, magnesium, calcium, just to mention a few. Medical professionals often recommend that people with conditions such as eczema or dry skin take saltwater baths or swim in the sea. It saves you a fortune on expensive spa seawater treatments. Swimming is naturally great at improving circulation. This helps your body deliver more oxygen to all its vital organs, such as the brain and the heart. Swimming counts as a form of aerobic exercise, and regular swimming can help guard against conditions such as heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. Most of all, open water swimming is fun. And again, anybody who swims in the sea will agree with this. The social aspect alone is what drives many people to participate in open water swimming. And finally, dementia. Researchers from Cambridge University have discovered that cold water swimming may protect the brain from diseases like dementia. A cold shock protein has been found in the blood of regular swimmers in London. The protein has been shown to slow the onset of dementia and even repair some of the damages it caused. Now, bear in mind these tests have only been done on mice to date. Next slide, please. Planning your open water swim. Now that we have all the reasons to keep swimming all year round, I'll take you through basic preparation for safe open water swimming. Again, this is for all, both seasoned swimmers and new to open water. Do a quick risk assessment before you swim. This should include weather conditions and forecast, sea conditions including rips, swells, sea temperature, etc. We'll go into this in more detail later on in the webinar. Any obvious hazards, including marine life, seals, etc. Know how you will deal with bumping into a seal. One of my very first open water swims as I trained for my first triathlon at Red Strand in Cork, I got very, very close to a basking shark. Now, at the time, I had no idea these guys were vegetarian. So, as you can imagine, I broke every record that day getting back to the beach. Plan your swim as a group, not as an individual. Never swim alone. Leave no swimmer behind. Put one person in charge. Same number in and same number out of the water. Have a safe entry and exit plan. Remember, with cold feet, it may not be as easy to exit the water. If you're not wearing booties, maybe leave your footwear near the exit point and be aware of sharp stones and shells that may cut your feet. You may not even feel it once your feet go cold and go numb. Wear a brightly coloured swim hat. Actually, wear 2 hats for heat retention. The bright colour ensures visibility, which is vital to keep you within sight of other swimmers and of other users of the ocean. Also consider wearing earplugs, as this stops the cold water lodging in your inner ear and can prevent motion sickness, something I came across a lot during the summer. Use a toe float for visibility. It's very important, especially during the winter, as other water users need to see you, and with less light this time of year, a toe float is invaluable. Consult a weather app before you swim. Magic Seaweed is one a lot of my swimmers use. There are plenty out there. Grainne will take you through how to read these apps and understand them later in the presentation. Take notes of tides, wind direction, wind strength, swells, temperature, etc. Have a plan, but be aware conditions can change quickly, especially during the winter, so the plan may have to change. For example, fog can come down quickly, wind direction can change. Be prepared for all eventualities. At this time of year, swim for time rather than distance, but be flexible and realise that you need to listen to your body and get out before you get cold. A 1 kilometre swim in the summer is a hell of a lot different from a 1 kilometre swim during the winter. January, February, March are the coldest months for both sea temperature and air temperature, and this will make a huge difference for your swim and afterwards for warming up. Build up your time in the water, and once you get more acclimatised, the more you swim and dip. Only stay in as long as you feel comfortable. Don't wait for signs of hypothermia, and this will be addressed again in more detail later in the webinar. Plan your clothing. Layers are good for post-swim, easy to put on, not tight fitting is usually easier. A warm hat, socks, easy to put on shoes, because fingers may not work very well. Plan your communications, know your emergency numbers and have contact numbers for everyone in the group in case of an emergency. Have your phone charged. Next slide, please. Entering the water and swimming. First of all, take your time. Slowly enter the water. Don't rush in and throw yourself in to get it over with. This could cause cold water shock. What is cold water shock? It is the sudden lowering of skin temperature on immersion into cold water. The heart has to work much harder and your blood pressure increases. You start to gasp and your breathing rate increases dramatically. This can cause you to panic, and panic in water is something that leads to seriously poor decision making. To try and avoid this, you should, as I said, enter slowly, splash your hands and arms around to warm yourself up, then wet the back of the neck and let the water enter your wetsuit. If you are wearing a wetsuit, exhale as you immerse your shoulders into your shoulders. Take a few calming breaths here and focus on your breath rather than the cold. Before actually swimming, spend a few moments breathing into the water to eliminate brain freeze, which can be pretty savage at this time of year. Wearing larger goggles can help with this, as does wearing 2 hats. No breath holding. It's counterproductive and can cause you to tense up and put the body into panic mode. Start your swim slowly and control your breathing. With very cold water, it's easy to take off like Michael Phelps after a few minutes, be totally exhausted. Slow and steady does the trick. Swim for time, not distance at this time of year. Now, when I say that, the time will vary depending on your experience and your actual goals. You can build up your time in the water for winter swimming slowly. The more you swim, the more you become acclimatized. If you are brand new to winter swimming, I would recommend only staying in a few minutes and start building on that. While swimming, be aware of your surroundings, of other water users and your swim buddies. Be situational aware and responsible. Use your common sense, and if in doubt, get out. Next slide, please. Leaving the water. Remember your safe exit route. Have your shoes at the edge of the water if you are not wearing booties. Be aware you may feel a little dizzy and wobbly, so take a moment to steady yourself. Head straight for your towel and clothes and dress quickly. This is no time for socializing. You may experience something called afterdrop, which is basically cool blood from your extremities starting to circulate around your body after you leave the water. This lowers your core temperature, causing you to shiver. What do you do about it? Get dressed quickly and warmly in layers. Loose fitting clothes are the best. Warm hat immediately on and warm socks. Easy to put on shoes. Laces can be difficult to manage with cold fingers. Immediately after swimming, you may feel great as the cooled blood has not yet returned to your core. Best to wrap up warmly before it does. It's much harder to dress when you're shivering. Don't attempt to drive or ride a bike until your core temperature has recovered. Driving and shivering is not a good combination. If your core temperature drops too much, you may become hypothermic, and this can affect your cognitive abilities. Again, not good for driving. Drink something warm and eat something. Shivering takes a lot of energy. You need to fuel it. Keep an eye on your fellow swimmers. Somebody who appears completely fine getting out of the water may be in trouble 10 minutes later and may need your help. Get out of the water before you get too cold, and as you will continue to get colder after swimming, give your body a margin of safety. Next slide. And finally, above all, be safe, be responsible, and be aware. Happy swimming, everybody, and thank you for listening. Back to Caroline.
So our third speaker this evening is Graham Kerr. Graham is a beach lifeguard tutor. He has vast experience as a beach lifeguard on the County Council beaches in Cork. He's also part of the water safety team in Cork County Council. Graham is going to speak to us about water safety in general. He's going to cover jellyfish stings, tides and currents, and how to keep yourself safe in the water. So I'd like to welcome Graham to give his presentation now, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Hello, everyone. It's great to see such interest in our webinar this evening. I'll give you a little bit more background on myself before we start. I'm a Water Safety Ireland beach lifeguard tutor, but I've also worked and volunteered as a beach lifeguard with Cork County Council for 7 seasons and in a number of other countries. Here I am pictured enjoying the warmth of Mexico while on a project with the International Surf Lifesaving Association. The next slide, please, Caroline. Grainne is dead right. As we saw, there are many benefits to open water swimming. However, it is a double-edged sword. With any body of water, there are hazards involved. Approximately 320,000 annual drowning deaths occur worldwide, with drowning being the third leading cause of unintentional injury death. So I'm going to talk to you about some water safety tips from a beach lifeguard perspective. We'll look at jellyfish, rip currents, and then I'll touch on Ringbuoys and Loc8 Codes. Okay, next slide please, Caroline. One advantage over cold waters is that we don't get dangerous stingers such as boxer or Urkongi jellyfish like they do down under in Australia. However, there is one infamous jellyfish that does grace our shores occasionally, but I'll talk about that in a moment. So there are 5 species of jellyfish that are native to Ireland. Picture top left is a barrel jellyfish, which prolonged exposure to can cause an allergic reaction. Top right is a blue jellyfish, which does sting. Middle left is a common jellyfish, otherwise known as a moon jellyfish, and this can give a mild sting. Middle right is a compass jellyfish that does sting, and I've heard this compared to that of the sting of nettles. And at the bottom is the lion's mane, which can sting severely. Next slide, so please, Caroline. If you or someone you know does get stung by a jellyfish, the following are the do's and don'ts recommended by the health service executive. So, first and foremost, remove yourself from the water or the vicinity of the jellyfish. If helping someone else, make sure you don't get stung yourself. Rule number 1 of water safety is look after number 1. Then seek help and advice from lifeguards if you're on a patrolled beach. If you're not, and you must do it yourself, try to carefully remove any tentacles attached by flushing the stinged area with seawater, removing them with a gloved hand. If you don't have gloves, you can use a clean stick, tweezers, or by scraping gently with the edge of a debit card. Whatever you do, don't try to rub them off. Then apply a dry cold pack to the area. This could be a cold pack from a first aid box that you get and you squeeze and you pop, or it could be ice inside of a plastic bag surrounded by a t-shirt or other piece of cloth. Remember, you never want to put ice directly onto skin. It's important to keep any puncture wounds clean and dry to prevent them getting infected. Mild symptoms of pain and swelling can be treated with simple painkillers such as paracetamol or ibuprofen, but always check for allergies first. Mild itching at the sting site may respond to antihistamine creams. And of course, if you have bad symptoms or if they get worse, don't hesitate to go to the doctor, go to A&E department, or call an ambulance. Okay, next slide please, Caroline. If you do get stung, it's important not to rub the area. Don't rinse the affected area with fresh water, use seawater. No matter what someone says, don't let someone pee on your sting. Don't use vinegar for the types of jellyfish stings that happen in Ireland. Don't use alcohol, and don't put a tight bandage on. Many of these incorrect treatments can actually further activate the stinging cells. Okay, so next slide please, Caroline. Portuguese man-of-wars are thankfully rarely seen in Irish waters, but they do visit, like most recently in November when hundreds, if not thousands, washed up along the Cork coastline, most likely because of the strong storms at the time. Their severe sting can cause symptoms such as muscle spasms, headaches, diarrhea, difficulty breathing, heart rhythm problems, and others. And if these happen when you're in the water, you could be in a whole world of trouble. So instead of a cold, dry pack, we treat Portuguese man-of-war stings differently by immersing the affected area in hot water at approximately 45 degrees Celsius for between 20 to 40 minutes or as long as it takes. Alternatively, a heat pack can be used. This is also the case for stings inflicted by lion's mane jellyfish. Next slide, so please, Caroline. Portuguese man-of-war are often mistaken for by-the-wind sailors and vice versa. Here on the right is a great picture of a Portuguese man-of-war, which I think looks like a partially inflated piece of bubblegum that's been spat out onto the sand. Remember, detached tentacles in dead specimens can sting just as painfully as the live organism in the water, and may remain potent for hours or even days after the death of the organism or the detachment of the tentacle. Okay, next slide, so please, Caroline. Cork County Council beach guards get asked all the time if there are jellyfish in the water. Rarely do they get asked about rip currents. What is a rip current though? It's a strong, narrow and seaward flowing current that occurs on any beach or body of water that experiences waves breaking across a wide surf zone. They move away from the shore like a river running out to sea. This specific type of current is caused by waves and surf returning to sea via the path of least resistance, for example, through a gap between sandbars. So next slide please, Caroline. I want to emphasize to you just how dangerous rip currents are. They can move faster than an Olympic swimmer. For example, in 2008, Michael Phelps set his career best for the 200-meter freestyle with a time of just under 1 minute and 43 seconds. This is 6.4 feet per second. Rip currents have been recorded moving at speeds of up to 8 feet per second. So never fight the rip. It's a race you won't win. Rip currents are the proximate cause of 80% of rescues carried out by beach lifeguards. In Australia, rips cause the death of more people than bushfires, floods, cyclones and sharks combined. Contrary to popular misunderstanding, a rip does not pull you under. It pulls you out, and then it's the panic and exhaustion that leads to drowning. You will know you're caught in a rip if you notice that you're moving away from the shore quite rapidly, or it will be like swimming on a treadmill and you're making no headway. And this video illustrates two types of currents that we can find on beaches here in Cork. The one on the left is similar to the rip down at the western end of Guardstown Beach that pulls directly away from the shore, while the one on the right is similar to the rip on the East Beach at Inchydoney, which starts in the middle of the beach but pulls diagonally across the headland. Okay, next slide please, Caroline. So, how do we identify a rip current? This is important because, according to research, 70% of people cannot do so, while 2 out of 3 people who think they can get it wrong. But bear in mind, their appearance is highly variable, depending on local geography and the surf conditions at the time. Using these fantastic videos from Surf Lifesaving Australia, we will spot common signs of rip currents. If you look at the video at the top left, you'll see the deeper, darker coloured water indicating the location of the rip and most likely the gap in the sandbars. At the top right, there are fewer breaking waves or even a gap in the waves. This is the most obvious sign to look for when standing down on the beach. It's also one of the reasons why rips are so dangerous, because people will come to the beach and may not want to get smashed by the waves, so they'll see this camera water in between the waves and they'll go in there to avoid them, and next thing they know, they're caught in a rip. If you look at the video at the bottom left, you see a rippled appearance of the surface of the water, and this is surrounded by smoother water. This rippled texture is much easier to see when you're wearing polarized sunglasses. Finally, bottom right, you'll see foamy or discolored sandy water extending beyond the surf zone and or debris floating seaward. And this is the rip pulling whatever is floating on the surface of the water out beyond the waves. Rips may not necessarily show all signs at once and may have only 1 or 2 of these characteristics, so it's important to know them all so you know what you're looking for. Okay, Caroline, next slide please. The best way to avoid rip currents is to swim between the red and yellow flags at lifeguard patrolled beaches. Obviously, this isn't always possible, especially in Ireland and in Cork, where lifeguards patrol beaches weekends in June, every day in July and August, and the first 2 weekends in September only. So if you do find yourself caught in the grip of the rip, whatever you do, don't panic. Conserve your energy and consider your options. Remember, the rip won't pull you under. It is panic and exhaustion that will lead to drowning. If you are a weak or tired swimmer, I recommend you roll onto your back and float. Raise your fist in the air and call for help or blow a whistle. Either a lifeguard will see you and enter the water to help you, or someone else will see you and they can call 112 and ask for the Coast Guard. If the rip is circulating, float and go with the current, because it may carry you back to shore or shallower water. If you're a strong swimmer and have enough energy, swim parallel to the current, across the rip towards areas of breaking waves and back into shore. Either way, regularly assess the situation by checking whether your decided course of action is working. If not, try an alternative. You may need to change your plan several times before reaching safety. For example, if you're swimming into a longshore current that keeps pushing you back into the rip. Next slide please, Caroline. So, in Cork County, there are 899 and counting public ringbuoys, all shown on the map you can see now. I recommend swimming near these if you can't swim at a lifeguard patrolled area. You can visit watersafety.ie to learn how to throw a ringbuoy. The aim of this public ringbuoy map is to assist and encourage members of the public to report any damaged or missing ringbuoys. This map includes information like the identification number of the ringbuoy, the Loc8 number, which I'll talk about more in a moment, and the location of the ringbuoy. The link to access this map viewer is available at the top of our Facebook page, which is called Cork Coco Beach Guards. So Cork CO space CO Beach Guards. Okay, next slide please, Caroline. Cork County Council are in the first phase of rolling out Loc8 codes onto all the ringbuoy boxes in the county. You can see the code on the box just above the council's emblem. But what is a Loc8 code? It's a short alphanumerical code for your location, accurate up to 4 meters. It's like an air code, but the .8 app, which can be downloaded for free, and the website can quickly generate a code for every position in Ireland, not just buildings. The picture on the right is a screenshot of the .8 app generating a Loc8 code for the water at Sandy Cove near Kinsale. These codes can provide the emergency services with your location, which is especially helpful if you're not great with directions. So, thank you for listening. I hope this information helps you to stay safe and stay salty. Now I'll pass you back to Caroline.
Next to speak at our webinar is Patrick McLaughlin. Patrick is the head coach at Podium Fit. He's a level 3 triathlon coach. He's a coach developer and a tutor for Triathlon Ireland, and he has over 20 years experience racing and coaching triathlon. So we welcome Patrick aboard and we're looking forward to his presentation. Thank you, Patrick.
Hello folks, my name is Patrick McLaughlin. I'm a level 3 triathlon coach and I'm a coach tutor for Triathlon Ireland. And today I'll be taking you through a presentation on swimming in rivers, lakes and reservoirs. The main topics which we'll cover today is the differences in swimming in fresh water compared to saltwater, seawater, understanding the different types of currents. We'll be pointing out some safety considerations you'll need to take into account and also the correct equipment that you'll need for safe swimming. The main difference between fresh and seawater is obviously the lack of salt. Because there's no salt in fresh water, it makes it less buoyant. So this will increase your swimming resistance and it'll also affect your swim speed. So you'll be swimming slower in fresh water than you will be in the sea. There are also different types of currents that will be present in a river, which won't be present in lakes or reservoirs. And due to the smaller volume of water or the rapid flow of water in rivers, there'll be a greater and a quicker temperature variations, which we need to take into account. Water quality issues, also the clarity of the water. As most of you know, sort of river water, lake water can be quite browny and peaty, which can hide a lot of dangers or hazards in the water, like sudden depth changes, unseen dangers like submerged branches, and so on. And we also need to take into consideration other users or of the water, bodies of water we're going to be swimming in, such as fishermen and rowers, etc. We have 3 different examples of currents that we will encounter swimming in rivers. The first on the top left is a straight section of river where there'll be a main channel generally running down through the centre of the river, where the flow of the water will be faster and that current will then sort of be slower the closer to the riverbank. If there's hidden rocks or obstructions underneath the water, you will encounter eddy waves, which is where the flow of the water will hit the rock and be pushed back upstream again in a circular sort of current. So obviously the size of the obstruction and the flow of the river will have an effect on how strong this eddy current will be. So a large flow of water, or heavy flow of water on a large rock will cause quite a strong eddy current, whereas a smaller obstruction and a smaller flow of water will have a fairly weak eddy current. If you're swimming in a bendy section of water, a river, the water will generally flow faster. It will flow differently around the corner than it will in a straight section. So as you can see from the red and the green lines on the diagrams here, the water flow will be slower around the apex of the corner and it'll be faster on the widest part of the corner. So if you're swimming on the wider section of the river, you're going to have a greater flow to swim against. If there's bridges where you're swimming, the water will have to be channeled through the legs of the bridge. So when it is channeled through, there'll be a stronger current underneath the bridge, especially if there's a narrow span between the legs. And then on the far side of the bridge, as the river opens out opens up again, there can be eddy currents just behind the legs of the bridge. So we just need to be aware of those. Lakes and reservoirs will be less affected by currents than rivers. We need to take into account the lake or reservoir that we're swimming in. Is there a river feeding into or out of the lake? If so, this will give an indication of where the current will be. There will be a channel somewhere in the lake where there'll be a stronger current leading into or out of as the water flows into the lake or out of the lake. So we just need to be aware of our surroundings, find out where these inlets and outlets are, and that will have an effect then of where the current is going to be within the lake. This diagram shows us how we can use the surface of the water to sort of read if there's any obstructions underneath the surface. So if there's a downstream V in the water or areas of flat, undisturbed water, that will mean that there's no obstructions underneath, or if there are, they're very deep, so they're not displacing any water. So these are the areas that we want to be swimming in, because we can be pretty confident that there's nothing close to the surface that's going to interfere with their swimming. If there's an upward V, however, that means there's areas of rough water. It means there's rocks or obstructions close to the surface, and it's displacing and churning up the water. That means it's not really a safe area to be swimming in. Also, if there's ledges or drop-offs in the water, there's quite a severe obstruction in the water. And as well as that too, if there's a big enough ledge there, there'll be like a downward eddy wave underneath the obstruction as well too, so it could actually pull you downwards into the water as well. So we want to avoid the areas of turbulent water, especially like the B and C example here in this diagram. Most rivers and lakes are fed from peat-based sources, which leads to the water being very browny in colour at times. And this leads to poor visibility, meaning you won't be able to see very far in front of you or beneath you at times. This can lead to a lot of hidden hazards, such as depth changes or submerged rocks or so on. Also, especially around times of heavy rain or flooding, there can be a lot of agricultural runoff from land into the water. This can also be like industrial or urban pollution as well too, or people actually just dumping rubbish into the river. So this can lead to a lot of changes in the water quality. You need to be also mindful of unseen pollutions as well, like Weil's disease from rat urine, and for lakes is also as well too. There's a condition called swimmer's itch, which can be contracted from duck feces. Not very pleasant, but as well these have to be taken into consideration. Because of the smaller volume of water in lakes and also the faster flow of water in rivers, there's also a greater and a quicker change in temperature than there would be in a sea. The sea temperature would be a lot more stable and slower for temperature change. As well as this, water depth changes as well too. Like the water might seem warm on the surface, but underneath, with all the displaced water between you swimming and currents flowing underneath the surface, the water temperature below the surface can actually be quite cold. So we also need to take this into account and be aware of this. Just a bit more on the submerged hazards. We need to also be mindful of our entry and access points in the water. There can be quite a lot of reeds around some riverbanks, which can sort of trap branches and rubbish carried downstream, which can lead to sort of your foot placement, standing on sort of sharp objects and so on. algae on rocks can make things very slippy, so we also need to be very careful of foot placement. Unfortunately, most sort of popular swimming areas are also big picnic areas for people in good weather, or congregation spots for teenagers, and can lead to sort of like a lot of broken glasses, or even in sort of urban areas, like needles lying discarded around the entry points into the water. Again, we also need to be wary of submerged branches, rocks, shopping trolleys, and so on, heading underneath the water. And also, after heavy rain, floating debris being carried downstream from above. And because of the poor visibility of rivers and lakes, we should never jump or dive into the water. Even if it is an area that we're familiar with, there might have been an obstruction carried downstream from the last time we were there and could be submerged underneath. So we never jump or dive into a river or a lake. Up to now, we've been talking about swimming in rivers and lakes. We haven't mentioned quarries. The reason for this is we would not advise anyone to swim in quarry water. Quarries are a lot deeper than lakes and reservoirs, so the water can be a lot colder. This can lead to cold water shock in swimmers and them getting into difficulty quite quickly. As well as this, there can be hidden currents within the quarry that might show visible signs on the surface of the water. And because of all the digging and mining that was going on in the quarry, there can be very sudden depth changes. So there might be a shelf or a ledge that you can stand on, and then within a couple of feet, it can be a very sudden drop off into very deep water. The mining equipment that was used in the quarries could also be submerged within the quarry. Other bits of fencing and equipment could also be sort of discarded and dumped into the quarry, which might lead to a swimmer getting tangled up in if they're out swimming in the water as well. As well as that, there can be a lot of sort of dead animal carcasses, car wrecks, and other bits of equipment dumped into the water, leading to very poor water quality. So we, again, would advise people to avoid quarry swimming at all costs. Next, we're going to take a run through some safety guidelines to make sure that your open water swim experience is both safe and enjoyable. If you're not familiar with the area that you're going to be swimming in, get some local knowledge from someone that does. Local farmers are great for this because they will have a good knowledge of the area and the flow of water. So they'll know if there's any sort of dangerous currents or sections of water that you need to avoid. Also, know the location of where you're going to be swimming in. If you have to call in emergency services or additional help, you need to know the location to direct them to. Also, check to make sure that you have a mobile phone network where you're going to be calling from. You don't want to find out in an emergency that you're in a mobile phone black spot. Never swim alone. Always swim with at least one other person. Also, it's quite helpful to have a spotter on shore so that they can keep an eye on you or your group of swimmers, so they can sort of call emergency services if needed. If you're swimming in a river, swim upstream first, so you're swimming against the current, and when you're feeling fresh and full of energy. And then when you're coming back down the river, you've got the flow of the river to carry you back down. The last thing you want to do is go down the river, and then when you're tired and fatigued, try to swim back up against the current. If you're swimming in lakes and reservoirs, swim parallel to the shore and close to the bank. Also, when you're starting off swimming, start with small periods of swimming first. Don't go out and spend too long in the water. Start with a couple of minutes and then gradually extend the duration as you acclimatize to the water temperatures. This could take a period of a couple of weeks before you're fully acclimatized to swimming in colder water. So don't go straight into swimming 20, 30 minutes in cold water. Once you finish your swim, get out, get dry, and get warm as quickly as you can afterwards. And please use the right equipment when you are swimming. Be visible. Use brightly coloured swim hats and a tow float. This way, other water users and people on the shoreline can spot you quickly and easily, if needed. Also, be mindful of other water users. Is where you're swimming a local fishing area, or where the local rowing club go to train? Is there local wildlife, or is there wildlife in the area? Swans and other animals might attack swimmers to protect their young. Cork County Council have developed an app called Find My Nearest Ringbuoy, which shows the location of every ringbuoy in County Cork. Please download it. There's also a location code on every ringbuoy that if emergency services are needed, this location code will bring them directly to that spot. What equipment is needed for open water swimming? We advise swimmers to use a Swim Pacific wetsuit instead of a surfing or an outdoor activities wetsuit. The reason being that a Swim Pacific wetsuit has greater range of flexibility and mobility in the shoulder areas than a surfing wetsuit, which can be quite restrictive. This will fatigue the shoulder muscles quite quickly whenever you're swimming. Also, use a tow float. Tow float attaches around the swimmer's waist and trails behind the swimmer when they're swimming. This can be used for both visibility for other water users and also as a buoyancy aid if the swimmer gets into trouble or needs a rest. Use brightly coloured swim hat or hats for both visibility and warmth. You'll lose quite a bit of heat through your head when you're open water swimming, so a swim hat or multiple swim hats will sort of trap some of that heat in. Also, bring warm clothes and a hot drink for afterwards. Get yourself dried off and get warm as quickly as possible after your swim. That concludes our presentation. Hopefully we've given you some helpful information that will make your open water experience both enjoyable and safe. Thank you.
So that concludes the content of the webinar. I hope it was of benefit to you. And just to summarise, have the appropriate equipment with you. Plan and prepare properly. Swim with a group, never on your own. Know where the rescue equipment is before you go out swimming. If you have a medical condition, make sure that you have some type of an SOS bracelet on you, or check with your doctor before you go out swimming in the open water. Have some form of communication with you. Be familiar with your location. And make sure that you're swimming for the appropriate duration for your confidence and your skills. And above all, make sure you're safe. And I wish you happy and safe swimming. Thank you for participating.